Our list of campaign details is now appearing nicely on the screen, which means we can start to pivot off to the right-hand side of this page, where we want to show a form to our users that allows them to contribute some amount of money to this particular campaign. As I'm thinking about this form right here, I definitely am thinking that we might want to eventually show this form in other places in our application as well. So maybe if a user goes over to view requests to look at a list of all of the active requests, maybe that page should also show this form too, because we essentially want to be always bugging our users and getting them to spend money on our campaigns, right? Like that's the idea here. We want to kind of make it really easy for people to donate to a campaign. So I think that rather than placing all the logic for this component right here directly into our campaign show component that we've already created, I think we should make a separate reusable component whose job is to show this form and then handle the submittal of the form as well. So back inside my code editor, I'm going to find my components directory, and I'm going to make a new file inside there to represent that form. Remember, we're using this components directory to place all of our reusable components that we expect to be making use of multiple times inside of our application. Or if not multiple times, at least place components that we don't want to have display a visitable page to our users. So inside my components directory, I'm going to make a new file, and I'll call this contribute form.js because it's a form for contributing. At the top, we'll place a couple of import statements to get some boilerplate put together. I'll then make my contribute form class that's going to extend our component. I'll place my render method inside there, and I'll leave it as empty for right now. And then I'll do my export default contribute form down at the bottom. All right, let's go look at our mockup one more time. And I want to think a little bit about exactly what this component right here has to do. All right, so I definitely see like a form, of course. You know, we've got an input, we've got a button. We already took care of a form previously in our application on the campaign new component. That component had a spinner show whenever someone submitted the form, and it also called a method on a contract whenever someone submitted the form. I think we're going to end up doing the exact same thing here. So just like that contribute or that new campaign form that we worked on that had the spinner for the button and it showed error messages, you know, all that whole 9 yards, I think we need to do all the exact same things around this form as well. So if a user tries to contribute and there's some error thrown during the process, we really want to communicate that to our users. So with that in mind, let's go back over to our code editor and we'll import a couple of components from Semantic UI. And these are all going to be components that we already used back on the other form that we put together. So I'll import form, input, and message from Semantic UI React. Then inside of our render method, we'll return a new form. Inside of there, we'll place a form.field. So form.field. And this will contain our input and our label. So we'll do a label that says like amount to contribute. And then I'll do an input right underneath that. And I expect to eventually pass this thing a couple of different properties. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here. When we previously worked on that campaign new component, so here's the component right here, you'll recall that the input that we placed, so here's the input, it had a label, and we put the label position off to the right-hand side, just to kind of like indicate the units of what this label was for. So I think we should do that exact same thing over here as well. So on the input, I'll give it a label. And I'm going to label this with ether. Now this is a little bit kind of misleading for our users. You'll recall that in just about everywhere else, we've been working in terms of way, right? The minimum contribution is in terms of way, but all of the balance that we've been reporting has always been in ether. So we kind of want to make it really easy for people to spend a lot more money on our campaigns. And a real easy way to do that is to say, oh yeah, enter some amount of ether. So it's a lot easier for our users to put in like just 1 ether as opposed to like, 5,000 way, in other words. So we're just making it a little bit easier for our users to spend a little bit more money on our campaigns. we're also going to mark this label position as being on the right-hand side of the input. And when I save, of course, all my code jumps. Hopefully that's not too misleading. All right, and then I think the last thing that we'll do for right now is place our button as well. So I'll put my button down. We'll give it some text of like contribute. And then I'm not going to worry about, well, let's put on the primary property right now, and we'll worry about putting on that spinner in just a little bit too. And of course, we also imported the message component for handling our errors. We'll also take care of that in just a moment too. But let's first get this component to actually show up on the screen so we can make sure that we're going kind of like down the right path here. So I'm going to go back over to the campaign show component because we want to show our form inside this thing. So at the top, I'm going to add an import statement for contribute form. And that's coming from ... components contribute form, like so. All right, now last thing to do is place this inside of our render method. So I'm going to scroll on down. Here we go. And for right now, I'm just going to put it directly underneath our render cards. Okay, so just directly underneath it. That's going to make our form show up underneath the cards while we've been saying distinctly that we want to have this show up to the right-hand side. But we'll take care of that kind of layout issue in just a little bit. For right now, I just want to get this thing on the screen. So we'll place contribute form, like so. All right, so let's see how we're doing. Back over in the browser. Oops, another typo. We made use of the button component, but we never imported it from React Semantic UI. So let's go back over to the contribute form. And at the top, we'll just make sure that we import button as well. I gotta start keeping track of these little buttons, you know? All right. Okay, so I think that's reasonable for right now. Again, we want to have this eventually show up on the right-hand side, but we'll take care of that little detail in a moment. For right now, I think that the label looks good. We've got the label off to the side here, and we've got the contribute button as well. So let's continue working on our form in the next section.